Hey guys, Cam McClellan.
Al Lewison.
Welcome to today's Wealth WOD.
Workout of the day.
We got asked, Cam Scott, who's good friend, client of the Open team, asked a question last night at one of our client info nights, and we thought it was probably one of the best questions of the evening, and it was, what are the risks associated with property investing?
Yeah, so taking it further, what he said was, it was a very good question. He said, we talk a lot about the structure, we talk a lot about the things we do, how we do them, and it's well thought out, and a lot of it's put towards risk mitigation. But he said, let's look at it. There is risk, and what are the biggest risks you've got in what you do? So we thought we'd just address it to everybody tonight or today, and put it out there on the WOD.
So the two biggest risks, I'm happy to cover probably the one that I see, and that is if you lose your job. What happens? What do you got?
I'll probably talk about tenants.
Tenants. So job loss and tenancy. You want to do tenancy first? There's a couple of different break tenancy.
Two parts of tenancy. Okay. So what you got firstly is, let's say you've bought your property. This actually couples in with Cam's, and you can't find a tenant. Well, no tenant, no rent, and that equals a lot of money coming to your pocket, paying off your property and paying off your mortgage.
Not ideal.
No. Now couple that with what Cam's going to talk about, losing your job, and Cam will talk about how we mitigate that risk. The other one. The other one is bad tenants. So the way to mitigate the bad tenant one is a couple of things. So they can both be addressed, and what we focus on is new property versus old. If you've got a more appealing property, you'll have a tenant. So let's say you walk down the street, two properties for rent, similar rents, they're both 4-bedroom homes, people rent bedrooms, that's what they rent, that's what sets the price. Two properties, one's 10 years old, one's brand new. Guess what? There's a queue of people waiting to rent the house that's brand new, as opposed to the house that's 10 years old. So if you can pick and choose from a big line of tenants in your brand new property, you can choose the good tenants, and you make sure you've got a tenant. So if you've got a 10-year-old property, we talked about it during the week, we talked about a couple of WODs ago, I should say. If you've got a tenant, an older property 10 years old, and you only got one tenant scraping around, guess what? It's a pretty small barrel to choose your tenant from, and guess what? It's luck of the draw. So new property equals the best chance of A, having a tenant, and B, having a good tenant.
Yeah, cool. Losing your job's a big one. That's probably the scariest thing, and let's think about it. The scariest thing for most families is losing that income coming in and having a huge property portfolio and having to support that. So that's it's not good. It's not good. So, and I've probably got to have this conversation with Andy, my middle brother. So Andy, listen, this is the video. Watch it again if you think about it too much. Andy rings me up all the time and he goes, oh God, because he works in the mining industry. What if I lose my job? I go, we go through this again. All right. Have you got a buffer? So talk about buffers. Now buffers are amounts of money set aside to cover the holding cost of your property. Back in 2003, Felicity went through the same issue. Back in 2003, we went overseas for about 4 months, travelled around Europe, and we had a pretty substantial portfolio of property back then. And Felicity was freaking out because we both quit our jobs, had this crazy amount of property that we had to cover the difference between the rent and obviously the interest repayments. And Felicity just couldn't get her head round. So I did some basic numbers and I said, look at the buffer we've got set aside. So we'd set X amount of money in a bank account, which would cover the difference. So let's think about the basic buffers. If a property costs you, worst case, $100 out of your back pocket a week to hold. If you set a buffer for that property of $10,000 aside and you lose your job or you want to go to Europe for 3 months, that buffer takes a long time to chew into that buffer at $100 a week, yeah? So once you know that you've got buffers set aside for every property, you can take your time if you lose your job. You can go overseas and enjoy yourself. In fact, I challenge you. Set yourself a goal, set your portfolio up so you can go away for a period of time.
That's a good point, Cam, but geez, it's hard to save 10 grand on a property to put aside as a buffer per property. So what do I do?
You wait for your equity to grow. So ensure when you're buying your third or fourth property that you just set aside a small amount of money, because when you're buying your third or fourth property, you've usually had your first couple of properties jump in value quite considerably, so you get that equity growth. Part of that used for deposit and cost for future properties, but also set a bit aside for the rainy day. So Andy, watch this WOD again.
Have a good day.